Oh, it tells me. Nice. So, recording started. Um, all right. Welcome, everyone, to the Kansas City Witches meetup for May. We have Carey here who will tell us do a Hestia ritual with us and talk to us about Hestia. Um, a few things first. I would like to request everyone to check out our Patreon. I will post that in both events and in the chat in just a moment, as in just a little bit as well. Please, donate to give to our Patreon. It kind of helps us pay for all these things that we can do and keep going as an organization. So we have that. Also, starting in June, for our main event in June, we will be in person at Aquarius again. I believe masks. I know masks are required in the store, and certainly for the event as well. And I believe there is a limit of 30 people. And I'm going to try to be streaming it through Zoom as well. I think they have an Ethernet cord. I don't think they have Wi-Fi yet. I know. I think Katarina is trying to convince them, and so far unsuccessful. But I will be attempting to stream this through Zoom and record it, of course, as well. And next for June, we will.
I just lost audio. Has anyone else?
Yes.
Okay, I am back. All right. Where did I cut out?
In June.
Okay. In June, we will have Julie from Casey Conjure talking about basics of voodoo. And if you have questions for that, check out our event for that, and put your questions in the event so she can kind of see what questions are coming and be able to answer them, because there's a lot to cover. And I told her, whatever you want to tell us is fine. All right. And with that out of the way, I'll go ahead and let Carey take over. And I'm going to, I will be muted. I will make sure everyone is muted. And again, questions in the chat or the user raise hand. And we will, if they come in during the ritual part, we will address them after the ritual part. All right, Carey.
Thank you so much. If there is an audiovisual problem during the ritual, I'm going to need you to unmute and let me know, because in screen share, I won't necessarily see your face. So if you're like trying to get my attention, it won't work. So, hi everybody, I'm Carey Oxler. I've been a member of the community around here my whole life and have been practicing Hellenic polytheist for most of my life. And so I'd like to share some contemplation and information about the goddess Hestia. She is the often overlooked but incredibly focal and central goddess of Hellenic polytheism. She is the heart of Hearth practice, which is the heart of Hellenic religion. And because her gifts are so simple and so fundamental to everything, it's very easy for her blessings to be taken for granted, but she can be an incredibly powerful ally and relationship in one's personal practice. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to share who she is, what she meant to the Greek religions of the ancient world, and some simple ways one can work with her and understand her today. So I'm going to flip over to share screen mode. And we'll get things rolling. So I'd like to start by taking a moment to breathe and ground into ourselves, ourself as our core of our work, the vehicle in which we do all of our magic, the place we always start from. There are many philosophies rooted in ancient Greece that talk about different ways to come to understand the different parts of the self and how they function and how to wrangle them into something that you can work with to elevate yourself to be a better, stronger, more whole human being that can be in relationship with the gods and the world and other people in a healthy, empowered, liberated way. And those are some of the inspirations that I draw from in my practice. So let's take a minute and just gather all the parts of ourselves from the places they may be scattered in our attention, in our everyday world. We often tune out parts or let other parts go on autopilot. Let's take a moment to bring them all together, all centered, all anchored in our body, so that we're starting from a place of wholeness and from intentional being. Come, body. Come, life force. Come, hunger and lust. Come, heart. Come, memory. Come, thought and reason. Come, vision. Come, intuition. Come, inspiration. Come, spirit. Come, soul. We will enter the right in wholeness. And let's ground into the here and the now, this present moment, where we are contemplating this goddess of fire and foundation, the place of beginnings, this place of security, where we are in a comfortable space, able to sit and listen, share questions, tell stories, a place where we can connect to each other through technology. Even though we are scattered around in many different places, we can still come together in shared light and shared community. And that is also a thread of Hestia. Welcome. We begin in darkness. Imagine a time before humanity had the gift of fire. Imagine. Imagine how dark the night could be, how dark caves and rough-hewn dwellings of fallen trees and gathered stone. Imagine how work could not begin until the sun rose and would need to end at sundown, except on clear nights when the moon was near full. Imagine how cold that darkness could get. Imagine. Imagine the struggle to stay nourished without being able to smoke food or hides to preserve them, without being able to cook tubers and grains and tough leaves to make them edible, left with what new nuts and fruits could be gathered in their season, tender shoots in spring, but very little to eat in winter, and raw meat which could sicken as well as nourish people. Imagine. Imagine also being unable to boil water, washing only in cold, drinking from any freshwater source available as we followed our food sources through the seasons. Springs which did not sicken the children became known as holy, with good reason. Imagine. Imagine the nights full of wild animals, predators with better night vision than humans, darting in through the darkness like shadows with teeth and claws. Imagine trying to sleep, not knowing what was out there or if it would come in the night. Imagine taking a shift as a nighttime guardian of the group, waiting with a club or spear in the dark, watching darkness move in darkness as you imagine what could be coming. Imagine. Imagine the darkness, the cold, the uncertainty, the hunger, the disease and unease. And imagine with the rain, fire falls from heaven as it has flashed so many times and strikes a pitch-heavy pine tree standing tall on the hill like a hollow reed rises from the river. And from that awe-inducing fire of heaven, a new fire is born on the land, orange and red and golden, like summer blossoms in the heart of winter. And it shines like daylight and radiates heat like a mother's embrace and a summer's day. It can be fed and maintained, and the things that fire consumes transform into smoke and rise back up to the heavens, returning to the fire's original source in the great above. It can be carried on branches as torches to start fires in new places, to share this gift with others, to be taken back to caves and dwellings. The smoke seems to purify hides and food and water, driving away insects, and the fire drives away the night animals who seem to fear it. Those animals do not learn the way to care for it with caution and respect the way we do. And as we care for the fire cares for us, warming us, purifying, making many foods now edible and nourishing, so we can gather more food that lasts longer, have more time to tell stories, have enough to share with passing groups or solitary strangers, enough to care for the ill and the injured, enough to share with the gods. This fire becomes an important member of our community. As long as we feed her, she guards us, heals us, teaches us, feeds us. She transforms offerings given to her to smoke that rises to the heavens, lights our faces as we make prayer and song and dances. She warms us as we talk and share and laugh. She teaches us about transformation. Wood to ash, clay to ceramic, stones that run in the heart of fire into pools of copper and tin. She is the first mother of technology. She teaches about care. Care meaning caution about keeping the fire fed and care to prevent unwanted burning. About respect for the nature of things that can be blessings or dangers based on our actions or carelessness or arrogance. She teaches about memory and preservation. She teaches us about preparation. She teaches us about sharing and abundance. She teaches us about making a home. Groups that learn the ways of fire and maintaining a hearth stay healthy, eat better, grow, learn, and succeed in life. More of our children live to adulthood. More of our adults live to ages of wisdom. We share stories and knowledge and comfort as we huddle around the fire. We value the passing on of stories, and in seeking to do more of it, we invent writing. This is a goddess who gives so much to her people. And from the foundation of the household hearth, civilization grows. If you have a candle or lamp or battery operated tea light that you'd like to light, now might be a good time to do so, as I'm going to say a little prayer. Holy hearth flame, source and foundation of all human flourishing, our home, our nourishment, our health, our safety, the love that makes relatives and friends a family. Thine is always the first and the last. Open our hearts this blessed day. Touch our bodies and our minds. Awaken the good spirit that dwells with us and connects us to grace. Carry our prayers aloft into the realms of the sacred, and we will listen for your gentle voice in answer. Blessed art thou, bright Hestia. Let's just take a moment to appreciate these blessings of light, warmth, nourishment, safety, family, community, of home, in whatever way that looks for us right here, right now. Welcome, Hestia. Blessed be. So let's talk about Hestia and her role in the ancient Greek religions. From our simple cave fire, one-room houses began to be built with a central hearth as a stone-lined pit in the center, a place to cook that also lights and heats the whole room. And in later ancient Greek houses, the hearth is like a chimenea in the center of the home. And this is where food is prepared, and it's where the daily offerings to the gods are made. This is the hearth altar and the kitchen for the home. This is a reconstruction of what one looked like. And as you can see, it looks very much like the sort of chimenea that you can still buy today. Uh, these were popular in Mexico and have become popular throughout the United States. And they have a very similar shape and function even today. So here's a couple of examples of that. And large festival ritual sacrifices and temple offerings were made to a fire that was built on an outdoor altar. Here's that image from that first slide again, where we see a woman offering bundles of sticks to a fire that is built on a stone, marble, brick, or ceramic block. And on top of that, there's an indentation where the fire is built. That is an ancient Greek altar. It was outdoors. It was not inside of the temple. And it was just a pretty simple block of stone with a place to build a fire on it. When they were doing rituals to places that did not have a permanent altar, then they would parade through the streets with the rest of the ritual implements with a tripod. Here's an example of an ancient Greek coin with a picture of a tripod on it, and an example of an ancient tripod from a museum. And this was basically a portable fire bowl that you could haul along to wherever it was you wanted to go do your ritual. If you wanted to do it on the banks of a river, if you wanted to do it on a beach, if you wanted to take it to the top of a mountain, you could do this, build your fire in this, and it was a portable altar. And of course, we still use this technology today, often, when we're camping or in our backyards. Uh, the fire bowl tripod technology lives on. It's the fire that is the catalyst that transforms the sacrifice of oil, wine, incense, flowers, meat, bread, whatever it was that was being sacrificed, to smoke. And that smoke and that scent would rise to the heavens and would carry the prayers along with it. So, whether a mother praying for a child's health, a groom welcoming a bride into his home, a merchant sacrificing a rooster to Hermes in thanks for a great season at the market, or a city celebrating a festival of Dionysus, the prayers are made to the holy fire with offerings. And Hestia is the one who graciously receives the offerings and prayers and directs them to the other gods as needed. The entirety of religion turns on the holy hearth. Cities had central hearths because they were communities that acted in some ways like a home writ large. This fire was kept burning eternally, and if it went out, it was a bad omen for the city, and a torch runner would have to go to a nearby town or temple for a holy fire to rekindle it. The Olympic torch is this very type of fire, actually. This is a modern ritual lighting of the Olympic torch. These are actresses in Greece at the Temple of Hera who light the first torch for the Olympic torch runners. It's kindled in a sacred ritual with a parabolic mirror and carried by hand to the ceremonies of the festival. And it's a great honor to be a torchbearer in the relay marathon race, to carry the torch around the world from Greece, the birthplace of the Olympics, to wherever the Olympics are being held that year. Holy fire could be kindled like this, capturing the light from Helios, the sun, in a parabolic mirror to light the fire, or shared from a community fire at the Prytaneus or Prytaneum in a city or town that maintained an eternal fire. Or the other way that you could get a holy fire was gathering it from a wild lightning strike from Zeus himself. Since lightning is one of the holiest sources of fire, and the Greeks loved technology, it's a beautiful thing that our homes today are lit and warmed, our food cooked with light and heat from electricity. Even our community is finding ways to gather by this light to share stories on Zoom, like tonight. So never feel awkward about using an electric lamp or a battery-powered candle to honor Hestia if you aren't able to light a fire or a candle or an oil lamp. These technologies of the electric hearth call back to the original lightning-struck fires held holiest by the ancient Greeks. So don't let anybody tell you there's any shame in it. There's a Hellenic tradition that whenever offerings are made, Hestia receives the first and the last portion in the ritual. She was the firstborn of the Olympians, and so she was the first swallowed by Kronos. And then she was the last of the siblings regurgitated when Zeus overthrew his father. So in Hellenic religion, we say that she is the firstborn and the lastborn of the gods. In Hellenic ritual, holy fire is the gateway. It's the portal to communication with the divine. All prayer, all offerings, all omens, all ecstasy, all epiphany, all gnosis flow through the grace of Hestia as she holds that shining door open. So for me, I start every ritual by lighting a candle and offering a prayer, and usually offering a stick of incense to Hestia. We have the ancient Greek texts of the Homeric and Orphic hymns to Hestia, and plenty of people compose their own prayers, like the one I said earlier after the meditation, or just speak their prayers extemporaneously from the heart. Greek ritual is very chill. It's not usually tied up with a whole lot of formality and uh, orthodoxy. Um, Greek ritual is basically that you wash your hands and you come with a respectful heart. You light a candle, make an offering of a flower or a piece of fruit, uh, incense, or a splash of wine, a cookie, or a small portion of your meal, or an act of service, or a piece of art. You say or sing some prayers, and that's it. That's ritual. It's at its core, it's really simple. And Hestia loves everyone who shows up. She is the goddess of hospitality, and her hearth is welcoming to everyone who comes to it. She has a special fondness for cleanliness, for kindness, for hospitality, for gratitude. There are some indications that she likes purple flowers. The chaste tree is a type of Mediterranean tree that was sacred to her, and it has these pretty purple flowers in kind of big sprays like wisteria. Some people associate her with the color white, some with the saffron orange color of the fire itself. Some people associate her with the red of embers. She's simple blessings. She's a freshly cleaned farmhouse table. She's the smell of baking bread, the laughter of a happy family meal, the warmth of a clean, soft blanket, a mother's hands at rest in the evening, the bustle of hopes spilled to the household gods on the way out of the door in the morning. She's that seed of yearning that shows in the cottagecore aesthetic. She's the lights kept on in the hotel lobby, the sigh of relief when you come home from a long day at work, the wagging tail of the family dog on the rug, and the kindness of a stranger smiling and making room for you to join the circle. I just, I love this goddess so much. She's so accepting and gracious, and her hospitality and love are boundless. All she wants is for us to get our Maslow's needs met so we can become who we want to be so we can live lives of virtue and excellence and share kindness and hospitality and gratitude with the world. I found this quote from Sam Block, who's a hermeticist who runs the Digital Ambler blog, if you've seen it online. And he says, "Of course, I honor her because she's Hestia, but I also honor her to ask for her blessing. When it comes to Hestia, I think my goals are pretty straightforward. I want to live in a place that is safe, stable, and secure from those who would try to harm me intentionally or unintentionally. I want to live in a place that helps me obtain peace, prosperity, and protection from the world, both natural and humane. I want to live in a place that gives me tranquility and takes away tension. I want a place where I can live, learn, love, rest, relax, study, store my belongings. I want a place where I don't have to be evicted or come under threat of it. I want a place that won't be destroyed by plague, earthquake, fire, or flood. I want a place where I can be warm when it's cool, cool when it's hot, dry when it's raining, fed when I'm hungry, rested when I'm fatigued, and safe when I'm persecuted. I want a place to call home. Of all the sacred places in ancient Greek thought, from Gibraltar in the west to the Indus in the east, and all the shrines and temples in between, probably the most sacred one of them is the oikos, the home itself, which itself is the sanctuary beyond all sanctuaries, and temple beyond all temples, the one to which we ourselves belong. Hestia has much to provide for us, even in our day and age. So that's who Hestia is and who she can be. And that's the bulk of what I have to share today that I had laid out for our little ritual and contemplation. Uh, Theoi.com, the website at the bottom of the screen here, is a wonderful resource that lists all of the ancient Greek references to Hestia in mythology and writing, and has lists of her epithets and her cult centers and basic encyclopedic information about her. So let's just take a moment and give thanks to Hestia for being the light of inspiration for our little ritual of contemplation, and for gracing us with the simple blessings of hearth and home, light and safety, warmth and nourishment, friendship, family, and community. Blessed be. So now is a good time to open up. So if people have questions about ancient Greek religions or questions about Hestia, um, or thoughts you want to share, this is when we switch over to open mic night.
And feel free to unmute if you have something you want to ask or say or anything like that. I may start since everyone seems hesitant so far. So, for reasons, there may be has she ever been connected to Prometheus as far as bringing fire to humanity? And in what ways was she connected to Prometheus?
That's a very good question. Um, Off the top of my head, most of the myths of Prometheus are mostly about Prometheus stealing fire from her hearth on Olympus and carrying it to Earth in, some say in a fennel stalk, some say in a hollow reed, um, and not so much about what Hestia thought of it or what she was doing when he came by to steal the fire, um, or how she responded to it. A lot of that myth cycle has to do with how angry Zeus was about that, and not so much about Hestia. There are very few myths about Hestia. She, and that may be, the predictable problem of being a goddess of uh, peace and tranquility and everybody getting along, is that that doesn't make for good storytelling. Um, so she also didn't have statues in ancient Greece. Uh, that community hearth shrine would have the central fire bowl in the center, and it wouldn't necessarily have statues of her. She was painted on pottery and she was on murals as a humanoid figure. But if people wanted to pray to Hestia, they would turn to the nearest source of fire. They wouldn't look to a statue. Um, so she doesn't get brought up a whole lot in the Prometheus myth cycle. And she doesn't come up a whole lot in Greek myth in general. But because she's at every single sacrifice, she's at every single hearth offering, she's at every single wedding. She's kind of the water that Greek religion swims in. She's so omnipresent that they didn't talk about her a lot because everybody knew how important she was. And because she was so foundational, she didn't need to be talked about as much. Um, so it can be frustrating when trying to reconstruct some things, because if you look at the flow of what was important in Greek ritual and all these things, the fire is the first thing. It's the central thing. It's the thing that all the prayers are focused at. It's the thing that all the offerings go to. But it's sort of like they would sort of open with a brief prayer to Hestia, say thine is the first and the last, give her a splash of wine and move on, because everybody already knew how important she was, because they lived in that in their every day. And it was assumed that they were taking care of most of their devotion to Hestia in their everyday lives, in their hearth, in their home. And so doing a big ritual out in the streets or out by the river or out at the temple, um, it was assumed that you wouldn't need to do a big dog and pony show for Hestia, because everybody who was there had already said their prayers to Hestia when they left the house that morning.
Interesting. I do have a question in the chat. Is Greek practice considered an open practice? If not, how do you honor the culture?
Okay, so good question. And it is debated online because that is where the discourse lives. But the thing is, the ancient Greeks did not treat their religion as closed religion. Anybody could come to most of the big festivals. Anybody could be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, the most sacred rites of ancient Greek religions, as long as they showed up and could speak and understand Greek well enough to get the directions and understand what the priests were saying. That was it. The Eleusinian Mysteries were a closed practice. It was an initiatory practice. And they made an oath that once they were initiated, they would not talk about those mysteries or write about them or reveal them in any way on pain of death. And they didn't. So we don't know what they were. We don't know what the rituals were. We don't know anything about the Eleusinian Mysteries except that they happened at Eleusis. They were initiatory. What the requirements were to join them, which were minimal. But they did not exclude anyone on basis of gender, a basis of race, basis of whether you were a citizen, a freedman, or a slave. You could be initiated in the rites of Eleusis. There were a few festivals that were like women's festivals where just the women would go. But like that would be one festival in Athens on this one day of the year, and literally all the rest of it would be open to the public. Hearth practice was open to everyone. You did not have to be initiated into it. You did not have to have permission. You did not have to go through baptism. You did not have to learn a catechism. You did not have to get approval from a priest. You did not have to have any kind of conversion process. Ancient Greek religion did not draw lines in the sand like that. And so there are two groups of people who have revived the practice of the ancient Greek religions. And there are people like me who are pagans and polytheists around the world who look at ancient Greece and go, I want to try to figure out what it would be like to practice that ancient religion as me in the modern day. And that's what I want to learn, is about that ancient religion and how they worshipped and how I can translate that into my modern life. And there's also a group of people in the modern country of Greece who want to take their folk practices and build a version of Greek religion claiming their folk practices as their heritage that has been kept. Like on Good Friday in the Greek Orthodox Church, everybody goes to the church and they all light candles from a central fire at the church, and they take those lit candles home. They're trying to protect them from the wind, and they take them in lanterns and things so that they can keep the fire burning until they get that lit fire home, like carrying torches home from the Prytaneus. You know, there are people in Greece who say that's ancient Greek ritual that our culture has maintained. And so they are saying that their practice of worshiping the ancient Greek gods by incorporating these folk practices is an ethnic heritage. And so when they see that there are people like me in the United States who are not coming at it from that angle at all, I am an American woman wanting to practice ancient Greek religion. And they say, but we didn't give you permission for that. And I'm like, okay, but all the ancient Greeks are dead. None of you are the Pope of Hellenism because the ancient Greeks didn't have a Pope. And they're two separate practices. There's modern Hellenic revivalism, and then there's the ethnic Greek revivalism. And because they're coming from different sources and they have different goals, they perceive what it is they're doing differently. And so the people in the ethnic Greek practices think that I want to become a part of ethnic Greek folk traditions, and I don't. I'm not interested in that. I want to worship these gods that are eternal and have been around for thousands of years, and were originally worshipped in an open culture, in open practices, in an open religion. And there are a few people in Greece today who want to make it a closed practice, but that doesn't match any of the historical information about ancient Greece. I'm going to do a quick screen share again. Maybe if I can get the buttons working. Okay, so here's a map of the Mediterranean region, and this is Greece right here. This is the modern country of Greece with modern borders. But in the ancient world, there were Greek altars. Remember, a Greek altar was a very distinct thing. It was that block of stone that had inscriptions on it saying who it was dedicated to, which deity it was dedicated to, that had the indentation in the top for people to light a fire and make Hellenic style offerings and sacrifices at. And these existed on the coast of Spain. They existed in southern France. They existed all over Italy. They existed in Croatia. They were in Serbia. They were all the way up to the northern coast of the Black Sea. They were in Crimea. They were in what's the Ukraine today. They were all over Turkey. Major Greek sources of religion and Greek sacred sites like Ephesus are in modern day Turkey, not modern day Greece. There were altars to Greek gods in Tunisia and North Africa. Alexandria is named after ancient Greeks. Egypt had thriving syncretic religion between the Egyptian religion and the Greek religion for hundreds of years after Alexander came. Alexander made it all the way to India. And so there are altars that go off of this map that go all the way down past Iraq, down into India, that show evidence that there were people practicing ancient Greek religions in India. There are bronze bowls that are chased and decorated with images of rites of Dionysus that were found in India. This religion was not ever limited to the borders of the modern Greek world. This religion was widespread. And so it's very weird to say that a religion that was practiced across such a wide swath of the world and was practiced for thousands of years throughout the world should get very limited walls drawn around it today. The other thing is that those ethnic Greek groups lean pretty hard into fascism. They tend to be involved in far-right politics. They tend to be involved with very racist agendas. They want to eradicate gays from Hellenic practice, which is also bizarre if you know anything about ancient Greek mythology or ancient Greek anything. Like dinnerware was covered in gay porn in the ancient Greek world. Like it was everywhere. Most of the gods had relationships with people of many different genders. There were gods that were intersex. There were gods that would change gender. The gods would change the gender of mortals. There was an entire group of priests and priestesses. The priestesses of Kublai were men who went through rites to castrate themselves, and then they would dress in women's clothing and be addressed with feminine pronouns for the rest of their lives as priestesses of Kubale, um, of the Great Mother. There's stories that they would drink the urine from pregnant mares as an estrogen supplement, and that's where we got the technology of Premarin as an estrogen supplement today. I haven't dug as deep into that as I want to. It's fascinating stuff. But the Gali were these priestesses of Kubale in the ancient world. And so these people who want to shut the doors and say, no, Greek religion has always been straight. Greek religion has always been white. Greek religion has always been closed, are saying that because they want it to be that way, not because there's any historical record of that, not because there's anything in any of the writings of actual ancient Greeks or actual ancient Greek prayers or protocols of the religion that support that. That was a lot, sorry.
It was good. Um, there's also a question kind of tied to that. It says, do you believe that deities themselves connect or communicate with people regardless of race, religious beliefs, gender, etc.? She says this kind of stems from my previous question.
Could you repeat that a little slower, please? I didn't catch all of that.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Do you believe that deities themselves connect or communicate with people regardless of race, religious beliefs, gender, etc.?
Yes, I believe that spirits talk to who spirits want to talk to. And if people are able to hear spirits, they can hear spirits. That doesn't necessarily mean that spirits can bypass initiatory closed systems. And I'm sure this is going to come up next month in the voodoo conversations, because that is a more initiatory closed practice that has been initiatory and closed for a very long time and has cultural value on it being initiatory and closed. But certainly the Greek gods and spirits, who I know, and I know enough to talk about, they'll chat with anyone. They are friendly, and the entities that became the dominant pantheon of the ancient Greeks, remember, they have cosmologies and cosmogonies of family trees, multiple, not one, multiple different ones that don't agree with each other. Because, again, these were practices that were different depending on where you were. Ephesus had its own culture and its own holidays and its own calendar. Athens had its own holidays and its own mythologies. Macedonia had its own. Crete had its own. And so while they might have a lot of things in common, and there was a lot of sharing that happened between these cultures in this part of the Mediterranean, it was not a monolith, and it changed based on location, and it changed based on time. The early period religion was very, very different from late period. It was different whether you were out in the country or if you were living in a city. So Greek religion was not a monolithic thing that had canon or orthodoxy. It was pretty freeform and would be very, very different depending on the circumstances and context. But the gods talk to who the gods want to talk to. And we have information, like on that website I shared, theoid.com, that has information on, what the Greeks wrote about the gods in their mythologies and their stories and their writings about religion. Pardon me. And we have many of the prayers that were used in earlier period with the Homeric hymns and in later period for the Orphic hymns. And that was specifically an Orphic cult of Dionysus. So we know what their prayers looked like. We knew what was important to them by kind of reading between the lines and what they were writing about. And one thing that's consistent, whether you're looking at the religion or the mythology, whether you're looking at city life or country life or anywhere, is that the gods have agency, and the gods are going to go do what they want. They're going to go turn into swans. They're going to go mess with this king. They're going to go do whatever. They're gods. They're big, they're powerful, they are undying. But they're also interested in humanity very deeply, fascinated by us, and they want us to do better. That's something that all the philosophers pretty much agreed on, was that the gods want to inspire us or goad us into living lives of virtue and excellence and being the most badass versions of ourselves we could be. And when people tried to shy away from becoming their best versions of themselves, that's often when they would get double-edged blessings from the gods. If people were shying away from being a great hero, then the war would come to their doorstep. If people were shying away from going through levels of initiation, then things would go down that would push them into the hero's cycle of initiation through trials. So it's a recurring theme that at least the Greek gods and spirits are interested in humanity and want to get involved in our lives and want to help us be our best selves.
All right. Another question that popped up on here: is there a specific name for that type of altar? And with the block and the space for the fire is what they mean. And what's the oldest one of those altars found?
Good question. Oh man, I got a book on ancient Greek temples that's across the room. But we do a quick search here. Oh, that's not helpful. Google is trying to change the spelling of my Greek words to be helpful. And that one's all in Italian. Okay. Ancient Greek altars. Let's try to narrow that down. Okay. So I'm going to copy this blog post in here into the chat. Where's the chat? That didn't give me the chat. Zoom, you're so helpful. There we go. Okay. So, these altars, and oh, cool. This one has some examples of the types of altars as well. So the altar was called the bomos, and it really means any elevated place with the epipuron, which is the pan that would go on top that would hold the fire. And so it would often be like a bronze bowl, so that when the ritual was over, that could be taken off and the ash could be taken to the crossroads, and the bowl could be cleaned and the altar cleaned, and then it could be set back up again for the next ritual. Modular technology. And so the bomos, these raised places, raised pillars that were altars to the gods, were usually for gods of Olympus, gods of the heavens, gods of the great above. And there would be usually for underworld deities, um, deities like Hades and Persephone, altars for underworld deities, underworld spirits. Sometimes ancestors would usually be caves or pits in the ground, and those would be done a little bit differently than the usual. Whereas anything that you wanted to offer up to go to Olympus, to go to the hearth there, would be given to a fire on an elevated place, and the fire would raise it even higher. Whereas with offerings to the underworld gods, you would go to the place where there was a cave or a sinkhole or a ditch or a hole you dug in the ground. And you would bang on the ground, get down there and actually start banging on the ground to get the attention of the underworld deities in question, and then offer them your prayers. And you would take your offering, and it would be like in a jug or a bowl, and you would tip it over into that pit or low place, and it would go in whole. And you would tip it in, and you would walk away. Turn around and don't look back, like the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Um, because the underworld spirits were seen as being a little spookier, a little more something you didn't want to have follow you home. And so there was kind of a different protocol for underworld offerings as opposed to Olympic offerings. And you also asked about the earliest one. That's not the keyword I wanted. I'm not finding a quick answer to what the earliest one we know of is. And like we know that by the 3rd century BC, they were starting to use some different words for the altar. Euripides uses a couple different words. Bomios, probomios, bomian. And also, the ancient Greek world was not one country. It was many independent city-states, all of which had their own dialect. And some of those dialects would be something that we have a lot of documentation for, like the Attic dialect of Athens was very well documented because they obsessively wrote a lot of stuff down. And other dialects that were further out in the country or further away from central Greece started looking weirder and weirder and weirder. And we have fewer of those inscriptions until you get to some of the early Cretan inscriptions, and we still don't know what they say. So there's also that language drift making things difficult. Like I don't know a date. I'm sorry. I'm not finding a quick answer for that.
Does
And I don't
anyone
want
else
to
have?
tie things up while I just stare at Wikipedia.
That's fine. Um, all right. Here's a question. How often do modern Hellenists pray or sacrifice to those of the original religion? And if you feel comfortable saying which god do you connect with the most?
Okay, cool. Two good questions. So, um, some people do a little daily practice ritual. Um, and I did for a long time and would like to get myself back in the habit of that, to be honest. Um, and that might just be a simple 20-minute, when you wake up in the morning ritual, when you're having your cup of coffee, light a candle, say a prayer, and pour out a little bit of coffee for the gods as well, sort of thing. Some people will find will follow a lunar cycle. The ancient Athenian calendar was a lunar cycle, and we have some good documentation on what the Athenian calendar was. But again, every single city had its own calendar. They did not have a universal calendar, which makes it maddening to try to figure it out. But generally, like Hesiod in Works and Days talks about the first day of the month is the holiest day of the month, because that is when people make offerings to all of their household gods. And the way the ancient Athenians calculated the first day of the month, the Noumenia, was that that would be the first day when you can see the first crescent sliver of the moon after the dark moon, the new moon. That the dark moon would be a traditional time to make offerings to Hecate at the crossroads, take the sweepings out of the house, take them down to the crossroads, make offerings to Hestia, do witchcraft if you need to fuck someone up, whatever you got to do. And then, you know, the next day would be the new mania. There would be that crescent moon in the sky. It would be the new month starting. And the house had just been cleaned and swept out for Hecate's feast the night before. So the house was clean. You might do a little bit more cleaning. You would make offerings to all the gods of your household. And the gods of your household would mean Hestia, first and foremost. It would probably mean Zeus Ctesios, the god of the pantry, Zeus Herkios, the god of the boundary lines around your property. It would probably also include Apollo in many places. Um, and then also the gods that were related to your household's um, employment. If you were shepherds, then you would make offerings to Hermes. If you were weavers, you would make offerings to Athena. If you were smiths, you would make offerings to Hephaestus. Um, so the gods of everybody's professional life as well, because those were gods that had an interest in your household and its prosperity and functioning. Um, so some people will do like a monthly offering. Some people try to imitate the ancient Athenian calendar. I know that Hellenian has a calendar that takes a lot of the Athenian festivals and tries to encourage people to observe those. That's not something that I do, though, because I'm not Athenian and I'm not trying to imitate Athenian religion. Um, so I mostly just do hearth practice, and the gods that I'm close to are Hestia and Hermes and Athena and Hecate and Helios. And so those are the gods that I've been working with the most. Um, but I do honor Zeus, Zeus Ctesios, Zeus Herkios, um, and other aspects of Zeus. I'm perfectly willing to work with almost all of the Greek gods. I've done rituals that have involved Hephaestus. I've done rituals that have involved Hades and Persephone. I've done rituals that involved Demeter. They're all family. And so once you start to get to know any of the Greek gods, you start to get to know about their family too. And so it can be pretty common that as people start to work with the Greek gods, they start to add in a few more here and there. And then the statues start to pile up. And it sort of accretes like coral. It takes over the shelves of the bookshelves, and then you have to go get more shelves and put them on the wall. And yeah. But I don't know. I work with a lot of gods, but those are the ones I've been working with the most. Is Hermes, Helios, Hestia, Hecate. I got my H squad. I don't know.
Nice. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions about Greek religion in general, or Hestia, or anything else? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up. If Carey, if you have anything else you want to add, you can go ahead and do that too.
I think I've covered everything that I need to cover. Thank you all for having me on tonight, and thank you for letting me share this information. I've really enjoyed talking about the subject I can talk about endlessly, which is Greek religion and the Greek gods and ritual. And so thank you very much, Emily, for setting this up and for running the show.
Glad to.
We appreciate you.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and post the our Patreon link in the chat, and I will post it in the events on both Facebook and Meetup as well. And I will say, and again, we'll have a recording of this. In fact, our